All right, guys. So today we have part two with Nick Verhoeven from the Physionic channel. Last week we had part one, so we're going to wrap up the discussion here today. A lot of great topics, so I hope you guys enjoy.
All right. So another strong interest of mine over the years was curcumin. And I know you put out a couple of videos on curcumin over the years. That when I first came across curcumin, it was basically touted as this wonder drug. Now, I've seen you talk about it in the context of diabetes specifically, but I had seen it largely for inflammation.
Mm.
So, number of studies. I mean, if you go to like examine.com, I think there's 600 studies on curcumin. So, everything I had seen on it was positive. I had recently seen some doctor, and I don't even know his name to be honest, saying how, hey, there's just a general concern, not just with curcumin, but with any of these supplements where we are taking a compound within, like, in this case, turmeric, and we are taking mega doses of it outside of the natural, method of consumption. And is that problematic? And then they might cite, like a something like a cell culture study will just say, hey, look what happened to this. It's a strong pro-oxidant and you don't want that. And it's always tough when you're looking at, I mean, obviously, I know you're big on the mechanisms and I think that's great, but obviously, mechanisms can only take us so far if we're just looking at surrogate markers and we're not looking at, the end results. So his theory was that, hey, nobody should be taking curcumin because of that. I don't know if we have very long-term data on curcumin, but everything I've seen on it shows benefits. So obviously it's a large topic, but just generally speaking, it's something that you're a fan of. I think you said you don't personally take it. You mostly focus on the diabetes risk, but I'll kind of let you have the floor there.
Yeah. So first, it's a great point that focusing on mechanisms. I focus on mechanisms just because they're fascinating. I need to know about them for like a physiological standpoint. If somebody like you said, you asked me about trans fats, and I haven't looked into it in any great depth, so I can't really speak to the mechanisms massively on that front. But if somebody asked me about like yeah, for example, curcumin or insulin resistance, I like to know the mechanism so I can actually describe the pathway and whatnot. So that's for me, that's the reason why I like to look at mechanisms. But in terms of the hierarchy of evidence, it's exactly to your point that we should be starting out with human trials of some sort, intervention trials, even correlation studies, but the intervention trials are going to obviously trump the correlation studies. Intervention studies being usually randomized controlled trials, but there are other intervention studies that aren't necessarily quite as rigorous. So that's where we should start. Then we can start to look at maybe we can start to look at some correlation studies or looking at like cohort studies or prospective associative studies or retrospective. Like there's these different bars within the correlation study area. And then you can start to look at maybe, let's say, animal research. And you can even have some outcome data for animal research, and then you can really look into the mechanisms. So mechanisms is at pretty much at the very bottom of the entire hierarchy, although it is very informative and it's fascinating and it gives you a complete picture of what's happening within your body. But going back to specifically curcumin, yeah, every study that I've looked at, which I specifically analyzed at least 10, if not 15, and I've looked at even non-publicly aired videos. I've looked at maybe like 20 other studies on curcumin on a number of different areas, including inflammation. And I have not run across a study that has shown negative effects of curcumin. These are almost all intervention trials showing that if you give curcumin, people either see no benefit, and there's a number of reasons for that, or they see a small benefit to a pretty sizable benefit. And one of the one of the major ones, one of my favorite studies, if I can nerd out and say that I have a favorite study, is this one study where they gave curcumin to one group and they gave placebo to the other group, and they then did a bunch of measurements specifically related to diabetes risk. So these individuals had pre-diabetes. They were given either curcumin or placebo, and then over 12 months, they had a number of measures taken over that 12 months. And at the end, there's just a single data point that I find absolutely mind blowing. And that the curcumin group at the end of the 12 months, 0 people, and this is a relatively large sample size for an intervention trial. They had over 100 and maybe 20 people in each group. Um, 0 people in the curcumin group developed diabetes, and 16%, I think, I'm pretty sure that's about right. 16% of people in the placebo group ended up developing diabetes. I mean, that's a massive protective effect. That's not to
Yeah.
say that, oh, I'm just going to take curcumin, I'll never get diabetes. I mean, there's limits to how much this thing can help, but clearly it helped.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful measure. And that was consistent across many studies.
Yeah. Do they have any studies comparing either directly or in a similar model, curcumin versus something like metformin?
So I haven't run across any studies comparing curcumin versus metformin. I've looked at curcumin and for arthritis, so it was compared against diclofenac, I believe, which is a drug for like an anti-inflammatory, anti
Hmm.
uh, injury, or however you want to describe it, but it's a drug, it's a pharmaceutical drug. And they compared it against diclofenac, and it did just as well as diclofenac. And in certain instances, it outperformed diclofenac for mitigating uh, symptoms of, I think it was some form of arthritis. If it was osteoarthritis, I'm not entirely sure. But um, yeah, but in terms of measures against metformin, I would not be surprised if there were studies like that. I just didn't run across any.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting to know.
Yeah, there was another one where I don't know if curcumin, there was the placebo, and then there was curcumin plus mesalamine, which is a drug for inflammatory bowel disease, versus just mesalamine alone. The mesalamine plus curcumin group clearly outperformed the mesalamine only group. I'd have to look at that and see if they actually just did curcumin alone and that had actually beat the drug. But yeah, to your point, there are a number of studies showing very significant effects. I believe you said that you don't take it because of the anti-inflammatory aspects of it, or something with it was like contradictory to your weightlifting goals.
Yeah, there's a number of things I don't take. I tend to I I'm sure somebody that doesn't take any supplements would probably disagree with the fact that I'm minimalistic when it comes to my supplement routine. I just the way I look at my overall health is that I work out a lot. I have a decent nutrition. It's certainly not super strict, but I've been counting my calories. I've been making sure I hit my macronutrient targets. I hit my micronutrient targets. I do all these different things, and I've just been doing that for, 12, 14 years now.
Yeah.
So I just don't, yeah, I guess actually maybe even more than that, 16 years now. So I don't worry about too much about like, oh, I need to have this one more supplement to really optimize things. Because the way I think about things is that once you've reached kind of a general threshold, you're as healthy as you can possibly be. And I don't think that adding more is going to turn you into Superman or anything like that. So
Yeah.
curcumin is a wonderful supplement. I may eventually start taking it. Maybe once I'm in my 60s, because maybe I'll start to develop arthritis or something like that, and it may help me with that. But right now, I feel great. I have tons of energy. I feel, yeah, everything is great. My blood markers are fantastic. So like, why am I adding another supplement when everything is already fantastic, all within normal range? And actually in ideal ranges. So there's just no point. I'd just be throwing money at something that
Yeah.
I don't need to.
Yeah, I think that's a good take on it. It is, you get a lot of people who they try to become almost like superhumans, or at least that is what is
Yeah.
sold. And I think there are a number of things where, you have a level that is good enough or even optimal, and going beyond that is either not possible or not ideal, right? So an obvious one would be like, hey, like blood pressure, right? If you have blood pressure is 140 over 95, you want to probably bring that down. I mean, plenty of evidence suggests that even 120 over 80, you can improve that. If you're at 110 over 70, nobody's going to say, hey, you know what, you should get that down to 90 over 60. Like that is not going to be better for your health, right? Um, the cholesterol one, that's interesting, obviously, for all the reasons we've discussed so far is, do you want as low as possible ApoB or LDL? But other things like, this is a controversial topic, but if you look at like IQ, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there's a very genetic component of IQ, and then obviously, there's other factors as well, but there's a lot you can do in somebody's life to bring down IQ. Obviously, like there's brain damage, there's traumatic upbringing, all these things that you don't get to that peak. But other than that, there aren't all these things you can do to just be like, hey, you know what, you're gonna just keep going up, and if you just take this supplement or whatever, anybody can have 160 IQ. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And so when it comes to health and longevity, it is interesting that you have these things where it's like, hey, you know what? If you have high inflammatory markers, maybe curcumin is helpful, maybe a fish oil is helpful, maybe these dietary interventions are helpful, but you can't get to negative inflammation, right? And you wouldn't want to, even if you could. So I think that's a very pragmatic approach that you have. And there's probably a lot of things that somebody, as they get older, it's just like, hey, maybe now you do have to focus on some of these things. You are going to have to be a little bit more aware of arthritis risk. Now, I guess I would be curious to know, and obviously nobody has this answer, but would somebody potentially stave off arthritis in this example longer by, let's say, taking curcumin 10 years prior to when arthritis would have started to begin, right? If that process was already kind of underway, maybe even by mechanisms that we don't know yet. And by suppressing things, could that stave off things longer? Could the fish oil or other, I mean, in this case, we do know this, right? If you were to lower LDL, it would hopefully never occur. So are there other things that we don't understand as well that taking it earlier would stave off some of these things? I don't know.
Yeah,
It's an interesting topic.
that's a great point, and you're right. I definitely don't know the answer to that. I suppose there are certain things like omega-3 fatty acids that we now have enough research on brain
Mhm.
health, that they do have a tremendous effect. I'll put it this way, that if you take this supplement, you can't get the components of this supplement are so critical to your brain health. So your brain is mostly made of DHA, which is this omega-3 fatty acid. So if you don't have enough of it, of course you're going to have long-term consequences, and the turnover of your brain is not very fast. So as in like the replacement of different components of your cells.
Yeah.
So having this continuous supplementation from especially very early on, especially when your brain development is growing quite rapidly and the plasticity is extremely rapid and whatnot. But especially yeah, throughout your life, I would guess that this omega-3 that can't be replaced by something else, like the curcumin's, let's say, anti-inflammatory effects, maybe the mechanism is unique to curcumin, but you could find other ingredients that maybe have also an anti-inflammatory effect. So you could find a way to maybe still have that overall long-term benefit through other means. But with something like omega-3s, it is literally part of your brain. You can't, it's not like curcumin is part of your brain. So,
Mhm.
so you, I could make an argument for certain supplements over other supplements, but the long answer is yeah, I mean, long-term answer, I don't know.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. This is something that research still needs to figure out.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing with the audience what your current supplement regimen is? I mean,
I
you mentioned.
refuse. No, yeah, I'd be happy to. So I take creatine uh, for multiple reasons. One, for musculature. That was the main reason why I started taking it, because like you, I've been lifting for 15 years now, something like that. So it's been a long time. I know I don't look it, but it's it's been a long time.
The
So
natty struggle, man. We could look,
yeah.
you got to get tighter shirts.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wearing smalls now. Um, no, I take creatine. There's, I mean, just an astounding amount of evidence towards its benefits, especially from musculature. But even for the brain, more research is starting to come out. I've covered that in the past. So so I take creatine. I take collagen peptides. I take that not really for my joints, although that there may be a benefit there as well. But I've looked over a lot of studies looking at skin health. And actually, this goes exactly to your point. I'd rather start early and just take these collagen peptides as early as possible so that I can stay as youthful as I possibly can for as long as I can. So
Yeah.
I take collagen peptides, I take hyaluronic acid. That tends to be in combination. And I take omega-3s. And I think that I've started taking L-theanine just for like anxiety. So I've been
Mm.
taking that to just kind of calm me down. I'm in the throes of the most stressful period of my life. So L-theanine, which anecdotally, I'll just put it out there. I've looked at a lot of research on L-theanine, and it has definitely, if you mix it in with coffee, so a lot of studies have done combination of caffeine with L-theanine,
Yeah.
and what they found is that you maintain the energy level, but you don't get nearly as much of that jitteriness. So you're able to kind of have a more stable amount of energy, and that's actually what I've found as well personally. So the research and my experience combined. So I take that, but that's probably going to be on and off. I'm not too worried about that. But the
Yeah.
main ones are omega-3, creatine, hyaluronic acid, and collagen peptides.
Have you looked into ashwagandha at all?
No,
No.
can't
Okay.
say I have, although I plan on it for sure.
Yeah. It's one that seems to have a lot of research on it, and almost all of it that I've come across seems positive, and in a number of different areas of interest as well.
Hmm.
A lot of people take it for anxiety, but I've seen it. People talk about benefiting sleep and other things, performance and whatnot. I've taken it a number of times. I've never noticed anything, to be honest.
Okay.
But I don't, I also am somebody who doesn't seem to notice much from almost anything I take. I take fish oil for all of the benefits we see in the studies. I do take curcumin. I take omega-3s and some other ones I've tried. But as far as ones you are supposed to feel, like I take creatine, but I don't even get like, people talk about 3 to 5 pounds of water when they start and whatnot. I don't see any of that. I see no difference in strength. I take it because it's like, hey, you know what? The research is so good for creatine, and there's almost no downside that I've seen. So if there are some of these other potential, even like brain benefits and whatnot, why not take it? So I do, but I can't say I feel much of anything. But I do know some people who say that they notice a clear benefit from ashwagandha. So that just might, maybe even for future videos, might be, an interesting thing to do a deep dive on.
Yeah, it's a super interesting topic. I've done absolutely zero reading. I barely even know how to spell it. So
Yeah.
um, I'll take your word for it. But yeah, I'd be especially interested in that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a great topic.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the collagen because I did
Okay.
see you had a couple of videos on it. Um, I've seen Lane Norton talk about it before, but more in the context of like muscle growth and whatnot, and that collagen is, basically a low quality protein in terms of muscle growth, and certain studies show it. So, funny story on that. I have an affiliate link with bulk supplements, and I don't usually talk about much of anything
Yeah.
with all that stuff, but I do have an affiliate link, so if people are interested, you can check it out below. But they sent me a sample, and they told me to select the size. So I'm like, okay, I'll select the size. And I just saw like there was like one option of 22 pounds. So I was like, I'm just gonna select this and see what happens. So they sent me like 10 of these huge bags of I wanted to get creatine and citrulline, and they messed up the order, and I got creatine and hydrolyzed collagen. And I was like, well, this is useless. Like, I'm never going to use this, but I guess I have it now. And then I was like, like I already get high protein intake where, I could afford it if some is not like the most ideal, quality. And I've seen your videos in collagen, and some people, it's a very interesting topic because a lot of people, I always like to read the comment sections of videos because I think it can provide, so, you get some very intelligent people in the comment section. Sometimes you just get
Absolutely.
funny memes, and there's like a
Hmm.
community aspect of it. But to me, a huge aspect of YouTube is actually the community feel to it and the comment section. So in any case, I saw in your video and some others, a lot of people saying that they really noticed a big difference in collagen. Obviously, I mean, in like skin and just how they were feeling. Now, obviously, that's completely anecdotal, but I'm like, you know what? Why not? So even actually just the last 2 weeks, I have started to dig into this like 20 pounds of collagen that I have. And I can't say I've noticed anything, but I don't think I'm going to notice anything negative. So that's my collagen story. But why do you take it?
20 pounds of collagen. Geez.
Yeah.
That's kind of a dream, honestly. I mean, what it'll last you years, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty great. The reason why I take collagen is specifically for skin. I'm trying to maintain my radiant beauty
Mm,
for as long as I can. It may be a lost cause, but so that's the main reason I've been taking it. So you mentioned Lane. I actually disagree with Dr. Norton on collagen in certain respects. He's absolutely right that collagen is a very low quality protein in its own right for like muscle growth. So I definitely don't take it for that. Uh, the amino acid composition of it is incredibly weak by comparison to something like whey protein, casein protein, or any of those, or meats or soy protein even. So I don't take it for that, but the area that I disagree with Lane is, and I think he's fantastic. His work is really fantastic overall. Um, the mistake that he makes is that he believes that collagen, just like most other proteins, enter the intestines after they've been broken down, and then they get broken down further in the intestines. And then they get absorbed as single amino acids. So for those listening, amino acids are the building blocks, the actual parts that make up the protein itself. And then that gets absorbed into the bloodstream, and then the amino acids that get delivered to all the different tissues start off at the liver and then go to all the different tissues, and then the tissues take up those amino acids, and those amino acids have a role in protein synthesis, or they can act as signaling molecules themselves, like leucine, valine, arginine, and methionine. And the mistake that he makes is that collagen peptides are actually not only absorbed as single amino acids, they're actually absorbed also as di and tripeptides. And there are studies that show in humans the absorption. So they literally just take collagen or they take some protein, and then they measure their blood levels, and they find in the blood specifically di and tripeptides, meaning that two or three amino acids are still stitched together. So they're still bound to one another. And that's the critical component of what makes collagen peptides potentially effective. We need more research, but the research so far is leaning more and more in favor of they are effective, at least what I've looked at, which is skin. And so these diantripeptides, what they do is the specific composition, I think it's proline, glycine, and hydroxyproline, if I remember something like that. It could be a little off on one of those. But they're stitched together and they circulate through your blood system, and then they end up binding to specific receptors. There's a host of different receptors that these collagen peptides bind to. So it's not actually the composition itself. It's not the amino acid structure themselves. It's literally the fact that they're bound to one another in this exact way. The specific three amino acids bound to one another, and they bind to this receptor, and then that leads to intracellular changes. So the receptor is bound on the outside, that changes the shape of the receptor in some way that ultimately leads to a cascade of events within the cell. The cell starts to produce more collagen. So it actually starts to produce not the collagen peptides, but starts producing more of the full collagen fibrils, the actual fibers of collagen, starts spitting those out of the cell, which then other enzymes come in and kind of rearrange them and put them in the actual structure that they're supposed to be in the extracellular matrix, which actually makes up the different tissues in your joints and makes up the tissues, especially in your skin. You have this collagen system that kind of props up your skin, which makes it look bouncy and youthful and whatnot. So that's one aspect. There are other proteins that are also in that system. So collagen peptides don't necessarily, they also provide the amino acids. So that's one aspect, but you could easily get those from regular proteins. You wouldn't need those from collagen specifically. But the uniqueness of collagen peptides is the actual peptide itself. So that's where I disagree with Lane. And I think, to be honest with you, I'm just going to predict that in the future, I think he's going to change his mind about it, which he's really good about. He's fantastic about changing his mind about things that he initially believed, and then he ends up switching to another perspective. He tends to be pretty open-minded about that stuff. So we'll see. But that's my current take, and that's why I take collagen peptides.
Yeah, yeah, I'll be interested to see if he does change his mind on that because I saw that I guess there's actually quite a bit of debate between Nick Norwis, who we discussed
Mhm.
earlier, and Lane about arguments back and forth, and obviously like strong disagreements on the whole topic there.
Yeah.
As far as the collagen, is it a specific type of collagen that you're taking? Because I've seen some people promote specific products and saying some say that just the hydrolyzed collagen is really all you need. Other people saying you need this specific formulation of it.
It's just hydrolyzed collagen. It's nothing special. So your 22 pounds will last.
Good to
They'll be
know.
great.
Um, is it something that you feel? I mean, again, I think probably you have to have clear studies for this so you can really, analyze the differences. Now, you have all these anecdotes of people, again, like within the comment section and whatnot. Have you noticed a difference that you really think you can kind of, appears out there? Or is it like, no, this is just I take because the research is good?
I've noticed zero difference. But I mean, that's an honest answer, but I am 100% willing to continue to pay to buy, a cheap collagen supplement as well as hyaluronic acid in combination because it's like atherosclerosis. These things take years. You have to think of yourself like you're in a parallel universe. Like there's another version of you that never took collagen, and the idea here, and this is all kind of in a fantastical world, but the idea here is that your skin you would look a little bit older, you would look a little bit worse if you didn't take the collagen. And it's just like atherosclerosis in a world where you're LDL, let's say you're not a lead mass hyperresponder, let's just go with that assumption for the time being, and you have a sky high 500 milligrams per deciliter of LDL or ApoB, and you go forward with your life, then this person with the sky high LDL or ApoB is going to be accruing this massive risk over time. And they end up having a heart attack at the age of 43 or whatever. And you who continuously dropped your LDL, you may think to yourself, well, nothing's happening. But that's exactly the point. You
Right.
having nothing happen to you is exactly the preventative measure that you're thinking about, as opposed to like if you were to get to age 55 and think like, shoot, I should have tried collagen or I should have done collagen earlier, which there is some reversal effect of collagen. Collagen can reverse a little bit of wrinkling and whatnot. So it's pretty impressive in that regard. But I it just seems to me like a great thing to be preventative about. And just, yeah, I just tend to, I just believe so much in the science that I just say, okay, this is what the science says. I'm just going to put myself in the most optimal position in this regard.
Yeah, yeah. It really it comes down to I think one you have to trust the science in this case, like you're putting your faith in that, and then two, just that it's going to be individual as every like you could have a range of supplements from hey we have an immense amount of data to support this and so even if you can't feel it like me with creatine right I mean creatine maybe one of the most studied maybe probably the most studied supplement in existence and has incredible evidence for it so that's one extreme where it's like hey you know what even though I don't feel it I believe the science and the studies on it so I'm going to take it all the way down to like, hey, here's some new random thing that some influencer put out, and they're saying that it's gonna, help XYZ. And so, you take it. Obviously, most of us would not agree with doing that, but there's going to be an entire spectrum there of better and better evidence of something that you really can't feel, and you're probably not going to notice for a while. Again, I understand with some of these people do notice things right away, but that's just going to come down to, I think, individual choice and willingness to spend the money and all of that. But yeah, I think with something like skin, obviously anything like health related, if you have the discretionary income and some of these things are not very expensive, like creatine, obviously incredibly cheap, or it's actually there has been a spike in creatine costs. But in any case, it makes sense, I think, for a lot of people to take them. Um, but yeah, it's just interesting to me because it's like how much do you want to be the person who's taking everything? Like some people I know, I mean, man, there's supplement lists. It's like 40 different supplements that they're taking. It's like, oh my God. And then they're switching it out all the time. They're like, well, this is what I'm doing now, but then this and this. And to your point, it's like, man, if somebody took hydrolyzed collagen for 6 months and then they did this and this, and like, what was the benefit of that 5 years later? Probably nothing, right? I mean, some of these things, you switching everything around, it's not going to do much. So I don't know if there's a strong point there, but more, it's just interesting. It's just interesting how much is out there and how much one could get involved in it if they really wanted to become obsessive on it.
Yeah, all great points. It's true, especially if exactly to your point about switching out supplements every 3 months or even after 5 years. If you've, again, if you go another 15 years without that supplement and maybe it was doing something for you. Yeah, it's tough. Like I think just getting into the scientific mindset of making sure that you have a pre and post test. I think that's something that people don't think about enough, trying to understand. I mean, you do this on a regular basis, right? Because of all the experiments that you've been doing and you've been taking a lot of different blood tests. So okay, I have all this information about myself. This is me pre. What if I do this intervention? What's going to happen post? And you think about it a lot. Like you were already thinking about, okay, I need to switch out, for example, it needs to be with monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. So you're already focusing on those aspects. And you were already talking about like the covariates, like your body weight and things like that. So I think one area that people could work on is understanding how to create a baseline for yourself, making sure that you keep all other variables as consistent as possible, making a change and making a single intervention change, and then on top of that knowing the timeline that change should occur, that you should see an effect. Because if you're going to take collagen for 2 weeks and then expect some sort of change, it's probably not going to happen. But maybe if you take it for 6 months and you measure again before and after, and honestly, if you really want to have fun with it, you could probably get some of your friends involved and take pictures of like wrinkles around your eyes or whatever, and then don't tell them which one is before, which one is after. And
Mm,
it's just like you could have a lot of fun with it,
yeah.
and get an idea. And how much confidence would that instill if you told if and you would have to have enough of a sample size. Let me just tell people. So you can't just ask two people, because one person might say the thing that you don't want to hear and the other person might say the thing that you want to hear, and then you're like, well, I don't know which one to believe. So let's say like 10 people, you ask 10 people, seven of them say, oh yeah, this one looks a little bit better than this one. Okay, then you get 7-3. So maybe you got enough evidence there to say, okay, this is really an effective supplement. And then then you can stop with the whole, well, I'm going to remove this supplement, I'm going to add another supplement because I think that this might work. You have actual evidence then on yourself that it actually does work. So then you can just put that out of your mind, say, yes, I'm going to continue taking this supplement for the rest of my life. And I know that it's effective because the science says so. And I asked 10 of my friends blindly in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
placebo, well, I guess not a placebo controlled trial, but it's still a blinded trial in that situation that you ran. So anyway, it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
a
it's
fun
tough
way
with
to go
those
about
ones
it.
where you're looking for, like in this case, we're assuming like there was a little bit of a reversal in this experiment, but some of the ones where you're talking about preventing, that's very hard because unless you have a twin who's not doing that,
Yeah.
it's how do you? I've talked about this several times on the channel, but for the example, like finasteride for hair loss and whatnot, and you get people who it's like they're on it for 5 years and like, well, compared to when I started, I feel XYZ way. And it's like, well, you're also 5 years older. And so it really does become tough. With hyaluronic acid, is this something that you are, I think I saw the supplement that you were taking, like the blue tub of collagen or something, and it had hyaluronic acid in it, or maybe it was just the one you recommended. Does that, so you are actually consuming orally the hyaluronic acid?
Yeah, the research on hyaluronic acid is really bad for the most part.
Hmm.
The evidence is slightly better for oral consumption of hyaluronic acid, so that's the one that I went with. Plus, it's easier. I just don't want to constantly be putting things on my skin.
The research is bad in terms of the quality or the outcomes?
Yeah, the quality of the research is horrible. The outcomes are actually pretty pretty astounding, but that's because some of the quality of the research is horrible. It's like I remember one study, the researchers literally, there was no blinding, there's no placebo control. So they literally had people just put hyaluronic acid serum on their skin. The researchers immediately, right then, looked at the skin and graded it as, is it better or is it worse?
Oh,
That was
wow.
one of the outcomes.
Wow.
I was incredulous, and of course, it was funded by a hyaluronic acid company and all that, but which doesn't necessarily dispel all evidence or anything. But when it's that blatant, it's like, come on. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
you
sure.
can just throw that study out.
Yeah, so I don't remember who it was, it my sister who gave it to me. I don't know. I got a serum, and it was True Skin was the brand. Obviously no affiliation or anything there. And I was like, well, if I'm going to try this, like, my whole thing is if I'm going to be doing something long term, I want to make sure it's working. I'm not going to spend this money and put on this stuff or whatever and go through it all this time if it's not going to do anything. So I don't think I've ever talked about this experiment on the channel before, but basically, I just used it on one side of my forehead just to see, which of course is like a ridiculous thing to do, but that's who I
No, I
am.
love
So,
it.
so I did that for I want to say 6 months, and I saw a pretty clear difference to the point that, and unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is preventative, meaning that like once something has taken place, like if you've got wrinkles or whatever, it's really hard to do much about it other than, I mean, you can do injections into the area, which is actually generally injections are hyaluronic acid and whatnot. But so you can do things like that. But so what I noticed was the side that I did not use it on actually had some more mild, like indented wrinkles there. And to this day, there's still a noticeable difference. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm just stuck with it unless I want to actually do, again, like a Juvederm or something like that.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I do believe in this product because I very clearly saw it. And I mean, I could send you the pictures and you could tell me what you think. What's
yeah.
funny is my cousin is a nurse practitioner who does a lot of cosmetic stuff. And I sent her these pictures. And it was funny how this is why I'm so big on objective data. So, I mean, you probably haven't seen much of the podcast, but I will frequently ask people who tell me that they've seen differences. Oh, I'm looking so much bigger. Did you take measurements? Are you actually stronger? Like, what? Don't just tell me you feel bigger. Like, what are the actual measurements? And the reason I find it important is in this example, I'm saying how there's a very clear difference, and my cousin's saying she doesn't really see anything. And I'm like, how can you not see anything? This is like very obvious in the pictures. Well, lo and behold, she goes, well, it's probably like a 30% difference. And I'm like, a 30% difference from a freaking like little serum that you can get on Amazon? That is a huge difference. But in her mind, she's
Mm.
doing Botox and fillers on people. And so she's probably looking for a 200% improvement, right? And so
Right.
it's just a
Yeah.
difference. So that's why I always say the numbers are really important. But yeah, so the thing is, this was not just a hyaluronic acid product. This is retinol with hyaluronic acid, and retinol has a lot of evidence for it. So that could very clearly be the
Mm.
the big powerhouse there. But anyway, interesting experiment that I have a permanent reminder of. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, maybe worth trying if somebody actually feels like trying some product for their skin.
Yeah, that's great. That's you've made the sacrifice for other people then.
Exactly. And do what I got to do. So just one or two other topics I wanted to go into.
Okay.
One was melatonin. So this is another one that I've never noticed any difference in. The evidence I've seen shows that actually relatively low doses are really all you need. I mean, I see some of these supplements that are sold 10 milligram melatonin pills and whatnot. The evidence I've seen suggests that really you don't need more than even 1 milligram. I've seen studies with zero point 0.3 milligrams. You didn't list it in your list, so I assume you are not taking it. Is it something that you recommend for people? Do you see that there's quality evidence for improving sleep?
Yeah, so you're right. I don't take it. So my understanding of melatonin is that it probably has more than just sleep effects, but I have not looked into those sleep effects. I've only looked at it from a sleep standpoint. Now, funny enough, we were talking, I think, before we recorded about physionic and just kind of the essentially no growth that it had for about 9 years. And during that time, so I'd say maybe 5, 6 years ago, I did a deep dive into melatonin that I wrote an article, published a video. I think it got about 20 views in total, after, like weeks of work. So I have looked at it from a sleep perspective. And what I can say is that it does work, but the way that people take melatonin tends to be wrong. It almost sounds like a thumbnail that you're taking melatonin wrong,
Right, right.
No, the problem is that people usually take melatonin as just like a single capsule, and it tends to be a short release. So it maybe helps them fall asleep, but they don't stay asleep.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is because generally those short release capsules, they release a lot of melatonin very quickly, obviously, since it's short release. But typically you want to consume two capsules at the same time. So you want to have a short, or maybe maybe they make them in combination now, the short plus extended release, to actually have the long-term effect of melatonin throughout sleep. Which when I talk to people and they tell me, oh, melatonin, yeah, it kind of works for me, but then I wake up in the middle of the night, or they say, I still have trouble falling asleep, but I usually can stay asleep once I've fallen asleep. The what's known as sleep latency for falling asleep. Um, it's usually because when I ask them, I'm like, well, what kind are you using? And they don't know. So then they look it up, and then they'll message me afterwards like, oh, it's extended release or it's short release. And it's usually you want to do that in combination so that you can reap the full benefit of melatonin, because it doesn't seem to kind of carry over from short to long or long to short. So,
Mhm.
but from the evidence I've seen, it does seem to work. Of course, if you're taking melatonin and you're also looking into blue light, you have a hot room that you're sleeping in, and like all these other contraindications that are playing against you, you have a very busy mind. You're not taking time to kind of ease into your sleep, maybe 15 minutes before. I mean, melatonin is going to have limited effect. It's not a wonder drug. It's not
Yeah.
going to, knock you out or anything like that. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's my take on melatonin.
And well, I think if you can sleep well in Baltimore, then you can just sleep well anywhere because there are sirens 24/7. So
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard them throughout this podcast. I thank my mother for that. She can fall asleep standing, so
yeah,
I'm with her on that.
I can actually fall asleep very well, but I always wake up multiple times a night.
Mhm.
I mean, I literally I've talked about this on the channel before. I mean, I like to read, but if I read at night in bed, literally, sometimes it's a sentence. Like I'm not even exaggerating. I will literally open the book, I will start, and then I'm just out. Like it's literally like a drug. It's amazing. Um, but then consistently like 2 a.m., 5 a.m. I just end up waking up. Sometimes I go to the bathroom, but sometimes not. Like it's just it's been a consistent problem for me. And I used to think, like going back to even high school, I used to think, oh man, like if I could get that down, if I could sleep really well, my gains would double, like everything would be. And at these days, I just don't really worry about it. I just assume like if I'm tired enough, I will sleep. And there's even, data to support that the people who like hyper focus on, I don't know if you've seen these studies where they'll tell people that they got less sleep than they did, and then they actually perform worse, right? So obviously, the mindset on it is very interesting. So I think sleep is super important. But to me, if I don't get a perfect night of sleep, I try not to worry about it, at least if it's just like one night or something.
Yep, same here.
Yeah. So the last topic here was it's a general longevity topic, but then also specifically, this ties into what we discussed earlier about taking things later in life was what people talk about as GlyNac. And this is one that I actually was not that I had not heard of it. I wasn't as familiar with it. And this might have been the first thing I saw on your channel, because it does kind of go back to this idea of they're like science communicators, but also influencers like Huberman now, Rhonda Patrick for years, where, Rhonda Patrick, I don't know if she still is, but she was on this big kick on self-perfing and like broccoli and whatnot. And um, I guess just this idea of how much of the influencer world, and I hate to call them influencers because these are legitimate like people who have PhD and whatnot, but um, how much is pushing these specific compounds that are are we doing more harm than good by having this obsessiveness on these topics? Or is it something where like, hey, you just have to realize that like where it falls in the hierarchy. You see this in like the fitness world a lot, where people really get obsessive about, and again, I don't know how attuned you are to like the most recent research in that area, but these lengthened partials and this extreme range of motion on the other, depending on which camp you're in, and some of these things where people get so obsessed that they are actually taking time away from the bigger picture, right? And so you've got people like David, who's he's like big on NAC, big on longevity research. Is
David
it
Sinclair.
Sinclair? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Sinclair.
So David Sinclair, where people are spending a lot of money and time on these I don't know what we call it minutia. Do you think that that takes away from, I guess, getting a bigger picture for some of these people to focus just on health overall? Or do you think that the excitement over potential leads people to then get more into that health lifestyle? I hope that was a relatively clear question.
Yeah, it was. Um, yeah, I wrestle with this sometimes, and I definitely wrestle with that question sometimes. I think I think that there are definitely at least two camps of people. Some people, let's call them the people that have this long list of supplements that you were talking about. Those are the people that are just super excited, typically about taking everything, optimizing everything. And they're usually the ones that are also motivated to do the basics, to exercise, to nail down their nutrition. Not always, there's always going to be exceptions. At least that's what I've found, that you have this group of people that definitely they're exercising, they're keeping track of their nutrition, they're making sure their sleep is optimal. They've got the different rings, they've got the wrist watches and all that that measure their blood pressure and their blood glucose, like all kinds of stuff, right? Depends on how accurate that stuff is, but regardless. And then you have another group of people that I really think that they're just trying to avoid doing the basics of
Mm.
actually exercising, working on their nutrition and whatnot. And they just want to have the answer as quickly as possible. Hey, I went to the doctor. The doctor said I have to do X, Y, and Z. I heard this supplement will help me fight all this stuff. How much should I take? When should I take it? Just tell me the answer so I can just do it. But then you have a deeper conversation with them and you ask them, okay, hey, how's your exercise? Like, exercise, but humbug. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't want anything to do with that. I just want to take a supplement. Let me just get it over with,
yeah,
or a drug or whatever. And like I have a little bit of empathy for that because I understand people are going through their own lives and they have, there may be all kinds of different reasons why they don't want to, or they maybe they feel anxiety going to a gym, or like there's a plethora of different reasons. I get that. But if you were to talk about them just in just as a group, yeah, I think that there are some people that focus way too much on supplements without doing any of the basics. And then if you were to combine both groups, when it comes to the hierarchy of what's actually important, if you're not, my mentality is if you're not exercising and you're not keeping decent nutrition, don't worry about like, is it keto? Is it high carb? Is it vegan, plant-based, whatever? Just keeping track of your nutrition, keeping yourself within a normal weight range, keep just doing very basic things like that. If you're not at least doing that, I just don't think that we should be having that much of a conversation. I try to create kind of hard guardrails of don't think about supplements until you're doing those things, and then extend outwards one layer and look at supplements that are definitely proven to be effective. For example, creatine, we talked about that. And then if you want to take another layer after that, that's obviously up to you. But the supplement conversation can go either way. Sometimes it can take away, sometimes it can be an addition.
yeah. No, no, I agree. It's tough because um, I'd like to think that most people online are genuine, but obviously not everybody is. But I think that I like the excitement it gives people. I try not to bring people down if they're saying, "Hey, I'm doing this or that thing," because it's like, well, you might not have Like I mean, I'll be the first person to nerd out about what is the newest thing in fitness. And obviously these days, again, after lifting for so long, you're not going to see massive changes, but it's exciting. And I remember very vividly being a 15, 16-year-old, and you get that new article or that new book, and it's just this amazing feeling that it's hard to replicate in life, that excitement over this new thing that's going to be a game changer for you. And I think as one gets older, there could be a similar level. I'm not going to be seeing a new, article in a magazine of how to grow biceps and be like, wow, this is it, right? But I might get that excitement over something that is like, hey, you know what? We have some new research coming out that is actually causing dramatic increases in longevity in, rodents, and then, whatever model that we're using after that. So I hate to bring down people's excitements as long as it doesn't then detract from, again, like they're not like, well, hey, because I've literally seen that where people are like, they're just like drinking regularly, recreational drugs, but they're, hey, the science is going to allow us to live to be 150 soon. So I'm not going to go to the gym today. It's like, well, I mean, you're really, I think, missing the forest for the trees at that point.
That's the Aubrey de Grey method.
Yeah,
I don't know
right.
if you've, yeah, he's, I don't know too much about him, but I've heard that he has that mentality of just live your life, and the science will figure it out, and we'll be able to get rid of aging, and it'll be no problem.
Yeah, yeah. I jokingly sometimes think about how they are going to be able to pause but not reverse aging when we're like 90. And so it'll be like this option of like, well, you could be like this forever. I'm like, well, I don't know. I might need to tap out at this point. Yeah, right.
Shake me out.
Cool, man. So really great talking with you, man. I appreciate you taking the time. It's cool that we got such a similar background as far as location there. I have a question. Do you
Mm.
work out at UREC Fit?
Yeah, I do. I
You
do.
do. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked there throughout my entire 4 years in dental school. So that
Okay.
was my home base. I miss it actually. I spent 9 years lifting in a university gym, at least maybe 10 years. And then, everybody there is more or less doing what you're doing, right? Everybody's kind of similar paths in life. And then,
Mm.
I started going to just like regular gyms, and I'm like, not quite the same feel. You don't meet as many people and everything. So, but
That's
yeah,
true.
a lot of two of my closest friends ever. We were just going to hang out last weekend if I didn't get sick. Met them both at UREC Fit. So
Yeah, that's great.
cool, man.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun going there for sure. I've gone to a few other gyms, and it's you're right. It's not quite as personable, but
Yeah,
yeah, as far as the podcast, it was a blast. I really had a lot of fun, so I really appreciate you having me on, and maybe we can do it again in the future.
absolutely. Absolutely. So where can people find more of your stuff?
Just look up Physionic, which is physio, Physio, and then NIC. That's it. Just stick that all together, and you'll find it.
Great, man. Good talking.
Yeah, likewise.